Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast, where empathy meets action in the world of leadership. Your host, Gino Degregori, engages with innovators and seasoned professionals from diverse sectors, all demonstrating the power of leading with kindness. And now, your host, Gino Degregori.
Today's guest believes that true transformation starts with intentional leadership, from tech boardrooms to nonprofit boardrooms. If you're looking for inspiration on how to lead with purpose, this episode is for you. Hi, I'm Gino Degregori, and welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast. Our guest today, Jamie Tozzi, a transformation and growth leader with over 20 years of executive experience in the technology sector, a former senior executive at Microsoft. Jamie helped build and scale Microsoft business applications and cloud businesses and led global teams in technical sales and partner development. She's also a professional coach, active philanthropist, and chair of the board of Darkness to Light, a national nonprofit working to end child sexual abuse. Whether she's leading a sales organization or creating impact through community engagement, Jamie brings heart, vision, a deep leadership insight. Jamie, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. To kick us off, can you please share a little bit about yourself and your story?
Thank you so much, Gino. It's great to be here. I appreciate you so much. Yeah, I spent the majority of my career at Microsoft, 20 years. In fact, when I left Microsoft, I was reminded that I was a dinosaur spending that long there. But it was such a great experience. I started off as a pretty low-level sales rep. And when I left, I was leading $1 billion business. So all that growth in between was like an MBA in a box for me. And the reason I stayed was I had so much opportunity to learn and grow, take on different businesses as I went. The last 6 years, I've been an executive coach to senior leaders at large companies like Microsoft, Salesforce, VMware, and also to CEOs of small and mid-sized organizations across industries. I'm on the board of a few tech companies, venture capital-backed tech companies, Gladly and Innovate, and also an advisory board member of Trident Construction. Darkness to Light is a phenomenal organization, and I spent 6 years on their board. I'm no longer on the board anymore because my time rolled off, but phenomenal organization and a cause deep and close to my heart.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Congratulations on all your success and quite an accomplishment and experience for a journey for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So the first question that I love asking my guest is, what does being a kind leader mean to you?
I love this question. And I had a feeling you were going to ask me that, Gino. So to me, it's two things. And kind leaders have to do both. It's not just one or the other. The first thing is they have to have an others-focused mindset. Arbinger Institute wrote a great book called Outward Mindset, very similar. And the second thing they need to do is have the strength and conviction to be very clear, clear with their team member, with customers. And so what I mean by that is the others-focused mindset. It means before you go drive your agenda as a leader, you always have an agenda. We have to hit these milestones or these KPIs. It's about really seeking to understand what are the needs and objectives and challenges of those that you work with, those that you serve, your customers and your partners. Super important. You have to understand what makes people tick and why they're doing the things that they're doing and what they're trying to achieve before you can bring in what you're trying to do. That's really kind. And then you need to pair that with the strength and conviction to bring clarity. I think clear is kind, especially when being clear is, a bit constructive, right? People really need to know and appreciate knowing where they stand at all times. They can take bad news, they can take, adversity, but if they know that you're being clear with them, especially when their expectations for what's going on is maybe a little bit differently than what's really going on, they appreciate those things. So others focused and strength and conviction, to be clear.
Beautiful. I love that. Clear is kind. I've heard that before, and it is true. Although it's hard sometimes because you don't want to potentially, mess up a relationship or the connection that you have. But if you don't provide that, you can approach it and provide that in a way that is very, be very careful, strategic, but you still got to be clear, right?
Well, I love this one because for me, I've really had to learn this and practice it. For me, having an others-focused mindset comes naturally. I'm very curious. I like to know what makes you tick before I start to try to influence you or talk about myself. But what I always struggled with especially early in my career, was giving constructive feedback. It was always difficult for me if I saw somebody missing the mark or they were doing something okay, but the performance wasn't great. I usually chose not to say anything because, I don't want to ruffle feathers or not be kind,
Right.
as you mentioned. But what I realized was it's actually more kind to tell people what's really going on so they have an opportunity to either fix it or rise to the occasion or hit the bar than not ever tell them. And I experienced this, one time in my career, I went for a job at Microsoft and I thought I was a great candidate and I went to go get that job and I didn't get it. And then all of the constructive feedback as to why I didn't get it started coming my way. And I remember feeling like, gosh, all these same people that are telling me all this constructive feedback, why didn't they just tell me 2 weeks ago or a year ago? I could have been working on it, right? And so when I got that in my head, that actually in a loving and kind way, if you can explain to somebody where they really are and some tips to how they can get where they want to be, again, putting yourselves in their shoes, others focused, it's way more kind and it helps them get where they want to be.
Absolutely. And I think there's what you said, in a loving and kind way, or a loving and caring way, I think is what you said, when you provide that constructive criticism or feedback or whatever, right? And that was tough for me too. I mean, I'm an introvert by trade. I'm not trade, by not trade, but I'm an introvert
by design.
Naturally, right? By design, I guess, right? I was made like this. And it was hard for me to share that because I saw it, right? But then to your point, if you're not providing that and people are not sharing that information to me or vice versa, right? We're not helping each other out. We need to provide that. And there's ways. And like, for example, I had a couple of leaders, one leader in particular that was struggling with a certain area. And she was phenomenal in these other areas, right? Like say there's 5 areas. And then out of 5, one area was really, really missing. And instead of approaching it like, hey, you suck at this fifth, one of the areas, I approached him and was like, hey, I appreciate everything you're doing here. I am noticing that in this 5th area, that there's a disconnect. What's going on there? Like, is it, and I started listing, like, is it something that you're not passionate about? Is there something that you're not comfortable about? So kind of provided different opportunities to just open-ended questions in a way that just open it up. And I was able to get the information back. And then I was able to regurgitate it back to her. Okay, well, if this is not what you're passionate about, let's figure out how we can remove that so you can focus more on what you're really good at and successful about. And we can delegate that or put that somewhere else. That makes sense.
I love what you just said. And to me, you just followed the framework, others focused mindset. What's really important to this person? What's important to her? And then helping her connect the dots. One example I'll give you is there was a person reporting to me years and years ago, probably the most brilliant person that I've ever worked with. He's still brilliant and a senior executive at a very large tech company. And I knew from others focus, like, what are your goals? He wanted to basically run Microsoft one day. He's like, I'm going to be a very senior executive. And he had the talent and the smarts and the creativity to get there. I absolutely believe that. And so I created opportunities for him to present to the executive leadership team. When he presented it first, his slides had typos in them. He showed up. He looked okay, but he didn't have a great executive presence. And so I went to him and I was like, look, and I could tell the way he was coming across wasn't hitting the mark. Like people weren't seeing beyond the physical to hear what he was really saying. And I said to him, I was like, look, this is really awkward for me to say, but if you want to get to this level, right, you need to work on your executive presence. And here are some really specific things. Would it be okay with you if I nitpicked at you every time I saw it? Like, it's going to feel like me having to tell my 16-year-old to make his bed. I don't want to do it. Like, I would rather spend time with something more strategic. And he said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And once I got the permission, when he sent me a slide deck before the next executive presentation, and I'm picking out all the different fonts that are on there and typos, and he's getting annoyed, I reminded him, hey, remember, this is why I'm doing it. It's not to nitpick you. You're brilliant. Like, it's fine. But if you want to get to the next level, and he's like, thanks for the reminder. You're right. And, that's kind. I could have just let it go, not told him that he wasn't creating a favorable impression. But 2 years in, and if he didn't see his career moving, he would have said, like, why, what's wrong? Yeah. Like, why am I not moving? And it wouldn't have been anything about his ideas, right? That's a great example.
What an impact. And you said now he's running a big IT consulting firm, right?
He's at one of the largest IT companies in one of the most senior positions right now. And he's absolutely incredible and brilliant and has incredibly strong executive presence. And I'm not saying it's because of me. I'm just saying, of course, I think at that moment in time, being able to point that out for him, maybe I accelerated him being able to work on it years sooner. And
it's the impact, right, that you're making, right? You do it not to get the credit or whatever. It's more about really providing value and helping others. And that's amazing to see that, that you were able to contribute.
Absolutely. Thank you. And by the way, I heard one of your former guests say, being a kind is not a weakness. It's actually a strength. I agree. It's powerful, right? When you act in kind ways like we're describing, it comes back
Yeah.
to you. When I can be kind and give people constructive feedback to help them get better in their roles and show up better, the impact on the business that you're driving gets higher.
Yeah.
Everybody raises, right? So
Mhm.
you don't do it for that reason. It really is to help others be successful, but it has a 100% accuracy of making your business stronger too. So it's an incredibly powerful
Absolutely.
skill.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And on that note, one of the things that I've been doing also, I'm very intentional about gratitude.
Mm.
Not only, being self-aware of just being gratitude to my surroundings and what I have in my life and everything, but also when I'm interacting with somebody after they do something, I make it a point to say, hey, I'm very thankful, or I appreciate what you're doing, and then that the connection of making that, providing that feedback to the colleague or subordinate or even leadership, right? It's like people remember how you make them feel. You've heard that before,
Yes. Oh,
than what
that's a
you
Maya
say, right?
Angelou quote. Love it. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. What do you think on that? I mean, have you experienced?
Well, first of all, the last couple of years, I've started a gratitude practice in my own life.
Mhm.
I usually wake up in the morning and my mind is racing with all the things I have to do that day. And I've been retraining it just to start with gratitude, thanking God for all the things that I have. It could be small or big. I will say in my time at Microsoft, I thought I did a pretty good job of that, but the reality is I was always on to the next thing. What's the next thing we're going to accomplish? What's the next thing we're going to do? And I wasn't good at slowing down for the gratitude or slowing down to celebrate successes of the team. And if I would go back and tell my early in career, leader self, what could you do more of? I think I would have done more of that. The celebrations too, right? When
Yeah,
you take a
right.
second to say, we just accomplished this milestone. It doesn't have to be the end goal, but like a milestone. When I got later in career, I wound up telling my team members, like, hey, I know I'm not great at this. I'm going to try to get better, but can one of you who is good at it slow us down and help us remember?
Yeah.
And that works too. You've got people around you that can help you be better too. But I think you're right, Gino. That was a practice for me. Even though it was in my heart to do that, I didn't always do it
Right.
because I was always like trying to achieve something next.
Yeah. We're high performance, growth driven, right? And you got to get there. But I think from a kind leadership perspective, I feel like connecting with people is very important. Being in the intentional, like, hey, I hear you, I connect with you, and here's where I am, what I can contribute to help you kind of move along, right? To coming back to what you said about wins, we meet as a company every other week, and we go through a just updates on the company. And there's a section at the bottom towards the end where I share wins, that whether we got a new contract or something that we're waiting for, like it was something that we did. And then I open it up, right, for folks. It's like, hey, share your wins. And
So
it can
good.
be professional. And I said, even personal, like, had a kid or bought a new house, or, what I mean? Those are milestones, and those wins create that energy, create that. We're all energy, right? So as we're creating that, sometimes I get crickets, and just because people are, being behind the camera or behind the microphone, they don't want to share. And I said, if you're not going to share, I want to pick on you, right? And I do it sometimes, or for the most part, people have something to share, but they just don't have the platform to do it, or don't want to have the courage to kind of just say, here's one. So I do pick on people, whether they like it or not. They do, they do share the good moments, right?
One thing I had an unconscious competency around similar to that. We all have these unconscious competencies, things we just do that we're good at that we didn't even know they were until someone points it out. When I was leaving Microsoft, I got a note from a woman who thanked me for something I had said to her in her career. For her, it was significant. For me, I might have barely remembered it. She said that I encouraged her and gave her something to think about that she hadn't seen in herself. And she wrote, don't underestimate the power of telling someone you believe in them, right? And I
Mm,
reflected on that. And that's the other thing I think we can do as leaders. Gratitude for sure, celebrating the wins for sure. But when you see something in somebody else, particularly if they're earlier in career, they might not see it in themselves. So if you say, you know what, I think you're ready to do this presentation on your own, or you know what, why don't you raise your
mhm.
hand for that job? Let me encourage you around that. Or you know what, I actually think you did a great job in that meeting. Did you see how people reacted when you did that. It's not just thank you for doing it. It is pointing something out that they don't even realize, that gives them it's all encouragement. It's all encouragement that little seed you plant, you never know how that's going to blossom. And that's what I took away from the woman who told me, don't underestimate the power of telling somebody you believe in them. And when I looked back on my career, I was like, I feel like that is my mission. My personal mission is to love and encourage on people. And can I plant seeds everywhere that gets them thinking bigger maybe than they were? And I know somebody did that for me. When I was brand new at Microsoft, I was 24 years old, and I was 2 months in my job. And Steve Ballmer was the CEO of Microsoft at the time.
Oh, wow.
He was coming to DC where I worked. And my boss said, Jamie, lead this customer roundtable with Steve. And I prepped all the customers. I got their questions ahead of time. But I had never done that before. I was 24 years old. Right. And I sat there and I was like, okay, who has the first question for Steve? And all of these CEOs of these local businesses in DC, they all clammed up. And I had my paper and I was like, okay, John, you had this question. But I was fumbling. I was red-faced. I was so embarrassed. And then once we got going, it went okay. So my job was to walk Steve to his next meeting. And I said, Steve, I'm so sorry about how clunky that was. He literally stopped, the CEO of Microsoft, to a 24-year-old young woman. He stopped. He looked me in the eyes. He goes, Jamie, people clam up when they see me. I thought you did great. Way to keep the conversation moving. Great job, right? He could have crushed me in that moment, but he lifted me up. And here I am 30 years later, still talking about it, right? So
that's amazing.
That's what we can do.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. That's such an impactful moment, right? That you remember, so memorable. Curious on the Steve Ballmer and then Satya, right? You were part of that transition, and Satya brought a different approach into with I believe it was the growth mindset, right?
Yes.
And kind of coming from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all. I've read some of those things. What are your thoughts in that culture as it relates to leading, right, an organization? Is culture important, and how was that experience moving from one CEO to another?
So I do what I do today because of how Satya showed me and hundreds of thousands of others at Microsoft why culture does, as Peter Drucker says, eat strategy for breakfast, right? Yeah. When Satya came in, the stock price was at 32, 34, something like that. It had been stagnant for the past 10 years at least. And everybody was kind of excited. They're like, great, what kind of strategy is he going to put in place? New products, new lineups. And he said, no, we're going to focus on our culture. We are a bunch of know-it-alls. We have to become learn-it-alls. And he brought in growth mindset. And I watched a 100,000 person organization shift relatively quickly. I'll give you one example, right? So you can really understand what this did. I'll never speak badly about Microsoft. What a phenomenal organization, phenomenal for me to grow my career. But it was tough. I used to go into my business reviews, and if there was a problem with my business, I would never talk about them. I'd say, hi, look at all these great things we're doing. Take a victory lap. In my head, I'd be like, gosh, please, nobody ask me about these bad things. And I'd walk out of the room sighing with relief, saying, great, I have 30 more days to fix that thing I won't tell anybody about. Post-growth mindset, you get judged on how much control you have of your business. So I would walk in and I'd say, hey, I'm really proud of the team. Look at all this great results we're having. And by the way, there's a couple of things that are not going well. We tried some things, they didn't work out as planned. Here's what we're doing about it. And by the way, does anybody else have any ideas for me? Right. Mm-hmm. And the difference when you started to share ideas, you started to collaborate and break silos down across teams, when you started to actually listen to customers and their feedback versus believing that we knew it all and we knew what our customers wanted better than them. Yeah. And now the stock has tried to look the other day like over $500 a share. And people will say, oh, that's because of the big boom in cloud services. Yeah, for sure. Right. But relatively, I know it was all about culture. So growth mindset, I've now brought to 10 to 12 of my clients and their organizations having equally strong impact in the culture. And so I could talk all day long to you about culture and transformational leadership. I think it's the most important thing and what I'm most excited about.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that experience. And you're right. I mean, it's culture is huge. And if you don't have the culture, if you're not intentional as a CEO or owner or even leading a group and building that culture is going to be created on its own.
That's right.
And it may not be the culture you want. you need to be intentional. You need to take action, right? So let's talk about your customers as you're talking about that. So transitioning from, working in Microsoft and, sitting on boards now, I'm curious on coaching, right? What led you to coaching, and it sounds like you're so passionate and love it, right?
I love it so much. When I look back at my time at Microsoft, I loved technology. I loved, the sales aspect, everything we were doing. But my favorite thing to do was coaching team members. And when I had a team member that would won one of the big pinnacle awards at Microsoft, it was better than if I won it myself. Like, I love that coaching, seeing others succeed. So when I left Microsoft, Microsoft was actually my first client. They hired me immediately to coach 10 of their rising star leaders. Pretty quickly after that, I was hired at Salesforce and VMware and some other places. And then one day, someone said, "You're a coach, right? My friend who's the CEO of a small business in the financial services industry needs a coach." And I thought to myself, well, I don't think that'll translate. How am I going to coach the CEO of a financial services organization? Turns out he's still one of my longstanding clients. And what I realized is these CEOs of small to mid-sized businesses, they're so good at their craft. I'm not going to coach him on his industry per se, although I'm getting smarter every day on it. But they haven't had the same kind of experiences I've had, or the coaching around the culture. Exactly what you said, Gino. Every organization has a culture. It's just whether you're intentional in creating and nurturing the culture that you want to see, right? So I work with leaders and CEOs to really help them with their own voice. How are they, driving the right change in their organization? One of the biggest things that I see, particularly in new CEOs, will come in and the board has, hired them to drive some type of change. There's a bit of the old, the legacy of the organization that they want to keep and bring forward, but there's something new that they want to add to it. And there's a really good model called adaptive leadership, which is pretty involved. But the biggest thing in that I talk to CEOs about all the time is pace. What is the right pace by which you can go and make some changes in the organization? And that's a really hard thing. If you go too fast, you wind up not bringing people along with you. You get like a revolt of the team coming after you. That's no good. Yeah. If you go too slow, then you're not meeting the objectives, or there's a huge opportunity cost. And so I work a lot with CEOs around the right pace. How do you, and it goes back to the principles I said at the start of this call, seeking to understand first, right? And then being clear, the strength and conviction to be clear about where the bar is and helping everybody clear it on your team.
That's amazing. The transitioning from coaching a group or those large organizations to now making an impact. Although the impact is different, but the impact I feel like is when you're talking to a CEO of running a smaller business, right, that is shaping it and building it in a way that is very intentional is huge. So thank you for doing that. It's amazing.
Sure. When I was at Microsoft, I was in a lot of incubation businesses where we were building the business for Microsoft and usually competing with very big competitors outside. So I was not in the core business. I was always in like dynamics or the incubation businesses. And what I learned was that culture was everything. I mean, you basically needed to have mighty small teams of highly motivated and excited people to do outsized things and drive outsized results. And when you had the right culture in place, people could do that, and they would have a lot of fun doing that. And so I think the same translates down to these smaller teams. And I love I still love to coach the senior leaders at large organizations, but the smaller organizations, you can just have an impact so quickly. And I just love everything about that.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned, so you follow a framework, or you have a framework called Others Framework. Is that what you said? Or
it's not really a framework. I read the book. I know you might ask me later. I've heard you ask other guests about like a favorite book. So this one is my favorite book. It's called Outward Mindset by the Arbinger Institute. And the whole idea is all of us are busy. We're not selfish per se, but I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm making my to-do list of all the things I need to get done and accomplish. It's very self-centered. I have to get these 5 things done. If we flip it around first, and so Arbinger says, outward mindset is all about asking 3 questions of others. What are your needs? What are your objectives? And what are your challenges? So, Gino, if you came to me and you said, Jamie, I need a coach. Mm-hmm. I need some consulting or something. A lot of consultants would come and be like, great, Gino, let me tell you what I do. Let me tell you about my 3-step framework. I would say, hey, Gina, great, you need a coach, but like, what do you need? What are your
Right.
objectives? What are your challenges, right? I want to know everything I can about you. And then knowing those things, then I can figure out if something I have to offer can help you achieve your goals. 9 times out of 10, they can, but now I can get very specific. So not only is it a wonderful thing to do, put others first, understand what they're doing first, put your stuff on the back burner. It's incredibly powerful because the more I learn about you, the more I can show you and how what I can bring can help you very specifically hit your needs. So that's probably the framework, and it's I give credit to Arbinger and Outward Mindset.
That's awesome. Definitely, I'll ask you again, and
yeah, that's okay. Maybe I'll come up with a new one.
That. That's a great approach. I mean, and it's really, I mean, that goes for sales, for consulting, right? It's like people, you have 2 ears for a reason, right? To listen more, and then you talk once, right? And funny enough, I've started a 6-week course internally that I'm leading in the organization called the Bravo Core Consulting, right? And includes their vision, kind leadership. And I was talking yesterday, it was week 4. And I talk about, I don't know if you've heard the LAER model, which is the listen, acknowledge, explore, and respond.
Great.
And it's relevant to what we're talking about because, listening, really listen to the customer, whether we're executing a project or we're getting a new potential opportunity to lead, truly listening and captivate that information, right? And keep asking, be curious. The other one is acknowledge. People want to make sure that we're understanding what the same thing. Oh, you know what? I heard this, I heard that. And that validates what you are. And then it does 2 things. It validates, but then also acknowledges that you are listening.
I love that.
And then explore, keep exploring, keep digging, right? The E is for explore, and then respond. Finally, after you listen, after you acknowledge, and after you explore some more, then you provide a response onto what you think the solution might be.
I love it. Did you call it LAER?
Yeah, LAER. Yeah, look it up for sure.
Yeah, I love that.
LAER. And my team really appreciated that. And I was just doing my research over the weekend, and I felt like that was a really good opportunity to, and it jives with what we're talking about, right? And to what you're talking about is listening. Listening is very important. Connecting with the other side and making sure that you provide a good value at the end of the day. So.
You know what it reminds me of? Like in my career, I had a chance when I left Microsoft to really reflect on my successes and some of the things I would have done differently. One of the things that always served me well was assuming good intent.
Yeah.
So when I saw, and Microsoft, for example, we did a lot with business partners, right? And so if I ever saw a team member or a business partner or even a customer act in a way that I thought was really not right, I had a choice. I could assume that they were the worst person in the world and to stay away from them and call them names or whatever, or I could assume good intent. And so I would ask the question, what would cause this really kind, amazing person who's just trying to do a good job to act in that way that seems so counter to that? And if you can stay in that space a little longer, generally what you find is that what their needs are, what their objectives are, what their challenges are very different than yours. I did this needs, objectives, challenges exercise with one of my clients. I sent out their senior leaders to go invite to coffee one person that they've had a kind of a rough relationship with, and report back. And one of the leaders had a coffee with an external leader of an organization that they partnered with really closely. And she came back, she's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea all of the things that were in their way on their side of delivering what I perceived to be so easy. And I was so frustrated that they never did. Because I asked her, what are your needs? What are your objectives? What challenges do you face? Right. And once I understood all the things that were in her place, then we figured out how we can work together more effectively. I'm like, exactly. Yeah. Most people want to do a great job. They just, there's something in their way that you don't understand. So and then, 10% of the time you do all that work and you're like, actually, no, that person was just a jerk. Good to know. Right. And you sort of move on to, but 9 times out of 10, there's something that you're just not understanding. And if you can figure that out, that makes you extremely powerful to fixing the problem.
Yeah. Perspective is huge. Like having that perspective on the other side is, I've learned that growing up I came to this country very young and I had to learn the language, I had to help my parents translate, right? And just seeing my parents, I was only at early age, seeing them uproot their lives and go into another country for our future and stuff like that. Even as a kid, I was like, I didn't understand what that was. But 10 years later, as I was, my 20s, it was such a perspective it gave me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot see myself right now uprooting and going to another country that I don't speak the language and then starting from scratch. And you don't know what's in people's lives. But if you're not intentional into taking an action and taking that first step and taking them out for a coffee or just a water cooler, or just go knock on the door, hey, you have a minute, it creates so much great, I believe, a great energy.
I totally believe you. And I agree with you. And it's just taking the time to do that is where you have to get off the treadmill for a second.
Right. So pulling a little more thread on the your coaching, is there a framework or a process you follow, or just curious, just to understand a little bit more, and maybe share with our audience here?
It's so funny. When I was at Microsoft, I had the fortune of having several executive coaches during my time there, and I have taken every single tool, personality tests, leadership test, like DISC and all these kind of things, that by the time I started my own practice, I was so anti those things. I was like, you know what? I am a practitioner. If you hire me, I'm just going to help you think about your team as if it were my team. I've led really successful teams. I've created great culture. So you just get me. I'm a practitioner, right? And believe it or not, that's exactly what these CEOs wanted to hire. They're like, oh, thank goodness, not another tool, not another method.
Yeah.
As I've evolved in the last 6 years, and that's basically what you get. I want to come in and I just want to understand what you're trying to accomplish. Over the last 6 years, I've added in tools, as I've learned about them, because I'm like, oh, these tools actually do have a really good fit, so we've done, 360 assessments for leaders who are just looking for a little bit more feedback in all directions for, how their leadership is, what the impact their leadership is having versus what they think it's having. That's actually a really good tool. But in general, I would say I like to be a little bit more consultative in my approach, pulling from a lot of different ideas and areas that I have.
Yeah, and I appreciate the transparency there, and because some organizations may need a little structure, some organizations may not. I like I'm fast paced, and I'm always researching, reading, and looking, and trying to innovate and evolve, or even self reflect on myself. How can I be better? Right, be a better leader always, both from a technology perspective, from an organizational, or even spiritual too. Right, like when I say spiritual, not religious, but more like self-reflecting on who I am and my purpose, right, in life. And it has allowed me to bring myself and lead in that way. So I appreciate you sharing that you have all these experience and you can bring, and you do have some frameworks and stuff like that, but I just wanted to understand it a little bit more. So thank you.
I am a coach to a person, to a CEO. Yeah. And when somebody is my coachee or I'm working with them, what it generally looks like, we're doing one-on-ones. And then what typically happens is that I get invited to their leadership team meeting. And that is a treasure trove of information for me. I see how they interact with their team. I see what's going on with team members. I see who's metaphorically got their arms crossed versus who's open. Then we're starting to talk about culture. I generally start working with the executive leadership team. And then sometimes it trickles down from there in terms of like organizational wide culture initiatives. Yeah. But it always stems from what is the leader trying to accomplish. And then from there, like I can learn a lot when I see interactions. So that's typically how these engagements go.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
I do have one more question for you.
Sure.
I know you're a host of a podcast, right? You've been doing this very well. I've great job in bringing those guests.
Thank you.
My question to you, what are some of, like, if you can share what's been a great topic of discussion?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, my podcast is called Executive Access. And I created it because my heart is for leaders of all levels. When I was early in career, I would look up to all the leaders ahead of me and I would say, oh, I could never be as polished and a great communicator as that, or I don't know how I could lead like that. And I would get discouraged, right? Nobody really tells you. And all these leaders act like, it's just so easy and they don't really share those things. And then I became a senior leader and now I work with senior leaders. And I realize 100% of us have imposter syndrome at one point in time or another. Let's just say it. Yep. But then you look around, you're like, I actually don't have all the answers, but now I'm a senior leader and I'm expected to. So who do I talk to? How do I come up? So there's all kinds of issues there. So my Executive Access podcast is to have real conversations with leaders, exploring, their journeys from early in career through their senior leaders, what mistakes they made along the way, what they did that was, awesome. And the themes are all around that, learnings. And what I hope is that early in career listeners will be like, oh, I can demystify what it's like to be on the way up and maybe realize that, it's a journey. And then my senior leaders, my CEOs, they listen to it and they're like, oh, it was so good for this other CEO to hear that somebody else is dealing with that too, right? And sometimes they reach out. So that's my heart for it. I'll tell you, one of the things that comes up a lot is around authenticity. What does that actually look like? And for me, as I was coming up at Microsoft, I would copy everybody around me. I would be like, oh, I'm going to act like that leader, dress like that leader, speak like that leader. And it was okay. It was safe. But I realized it was just a bad imitation. And when I finally started being myself, which is somewhat quirky, I would call myself a little nerdy. And I actually remember the presentation that I gave to my team, the exact presentation to my team of about 50 people at the time, where I truly felt like myself. I had my own quirky little slides. I dressed the way I wanted to. I used the words that I wanted to. And I felt the electricity in the room. I felt the response. And I go, oh, there it is, right? And so if I can help people think about being their authentic selves and what does that look like and how do you tap into that? And how do organizations create the space where people can show up authentically? I would say if I had to pick one theme, that would encompass the entire thing that I'm interested in.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And that's powerful, right? Like you just be yourself. There's no need to create this facade or persona, right? That you think is that imposter syndrome is real. Like I still have it, right? I was like, talking to customers or talking to all the employees. I'm like, well, it's you just have to push through. And at the end of the day, it comes back to believing in yourself. Like as a leader, as a business owner, or even individual contributors, right? Do you believe in yourself? The minute you shift that mindset and believing in yourself, the world is your creation into what you want to become.
I love that, Gino. And think back to what Vanessa said to me and I shared with you earlier. Don't underestimate the power of telling somebody you believe in them. As a leader, you have an opportunity to give that gift to somebody when they most need it that will help them on their journey of confidence and believing in themselves, which will pay dividends in their lives and also the business that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Amazing. So we're going to the next segment, which is Flip the Mic, where I'm going to ask you to ask me a question, any question you may have.
Yeah, I hope no one's asked you this one before, but you were a leader really early, and I know you grew really fast in your career. So I'm curious, what's one piece of leadership advice that you would have given your 25-year-old leader self?
Oh, man, that's beautiful. Don't let your age define who you are. It's funny, growing up as a minority in the States, that wasn't an issue for me. I never saw myself as I had a limitation or not a challenge. I was, thanks to my mom, she was always nothing is she gave me the strength to just go in there and basically just create my life that I want. So I never saw as a minority being an issue. But the age was a huge thing for me because I was in my early 20s. I was an entrepreneur. I was thinking about different things and, sitting and having conversation with 40s, 50 years old people, right? And when I first started this company 17 years ago, I was 27. And I had a partner, he was 12 years older than me. And I felt like I needed someone that was older than me that can help me drive some of this stuff or have those conversations in the big boy table or big people table, right? And that was a big challenge for me. It's like just getting past that imposter syndrome for my age. Now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, yeah, I'm no longer a kid. But if I had to go back and say, don't let age define who you are. Keep going, believe in yourself and drive.
I think that's beautiful. It probably built compassion for you and earlier in career people that you see and being able to encourage them up too, right?
Absolutely.
That's great advice. Amazing.
Thank you for a great question there. All right, rapid fire questions as we start kind of closing it up here. So you already talked about a book, but feel free to just remind us, what's a book everybody should read here?
Outward Mindset by Arbinger Institute. But I also am reading one now called Strength to Strength. I think it's Arthur Brooks. And for anybody who is at a point in their career thinking about a career transition, maybe later in career thinking about a career transition, you have to read it. You have to read it. So I'll just leave it at that. Little cliffhanger for your audience.
Beautiful. A favorite quote or mantra you live by?
Run through the tape. And it's my own quote. I say it all the time. My team, if they're listening, they'll recognize it. My track coach taught me that. Basically, everything in life is going to end. Your job, your career, a great experience. And Most of us, we slow down at the end, imperceptibly, the way track runners slow down when they see the tape. Run through the tape, make it part of your character. You will feel so good about the way you finish and finish strong. So in all things, and when things get hard, I'm right there at the end. I'm just like, Jamie, run through the tape. So that's what I have words to live by.
I love it. If you could have coffee with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
Elon Musk right now, because I am so curious about how his brain works. And I talked to him about all the innovation that he's driven in the past, what he sees around the future. And then I'd probably have to be a little careful, but I would die to pick his brain on his leadership principles, the good and the bad, even how he shows up, some of his divisiveness and everything. So just super interested when I see just people like that are just having such a huge impact and ways that are controversial in the world.
We'll love that. That's awesome. Yeah, we'd love to be part of that.
Yeah, I'll invite you. I'll invite you when he comes to town.
Absolutely. All right, Jamie. So where can our listeners connect with you or find you?
Okay, well, I would first and foremost love for them to check out my podcast, Executive Access. It's on all of the platforms, video on Spotify and YouTube. And then on LinkedIn, Jamie Tozzi on LinkedIn is where I spend a lot of my time. I don't do a lot of marketing of my coaching services. You got to be able to find me. And but if you want to share some ideas, hit me up on LinkedIn and let me know what you think about the podcast.
Awesome. What's the final kind of advice that you want to give our audience here?
I think that leadership is, at the end of the day, all about others. When I left Microsoft, what I cherish now, 6 years later, are all of the notes I got. And all of the notes I got did not say, Jamie, do you remember that time you closed that big deal? Or Jamie, you remember that time you delivered this result? It was all about, hey, Jamie, I want to thank you for how you made me feel, or this impact you had on my career, or remember this great time that we had together as a team. Those are the things that I remember. Those are the things that I cherish. And so as a leader, whether it's a personal leadership or leading a team or leading a broad team, remember that one day it's going to end. And what will your legacy be? And it's all about how you've helped others, how you've treated others, how you were kind to others, the way we've defined it. And that is a life. That's a life worth living. And I don't know that I appreciated that as much as I could have while I was still at Microsoft.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Well said. I can't even follow up to that. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
So, Jamie, what an amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing all your successes and the things that you're doing now and all the contributions and the impact that you made in your career. And you're still doing it, right? Not only in the coaching, but also the nonprofit world, how involved you still are, right? So very happy that we've had this conversation. It's really great nuggets that our audience is able to take away from this conversation. And definitely looking forward to continue our relationship and maybe bring you back in the future someday.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful experience. I love what you're putting out in the world, Gino. Congratulations to you. And I'm really honored that you had me on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And for our audience, thank you for listening to the Kind Leader Podcast. And remember, be kind, bring value, rise together. Have an amazing day.